Kia ora, my name is Andy Hamilton from Manaaki, and I am very nervous. I'm very nervous because this is the first, it feels like, the first real talk for 2022. So it's my pleasure I am nervous, is to welcome Megan Woff. Welcome, Kia ora. Welcome to New Zealand.
Thank you.
Are you excited?
Very happy to be here. Yep, I've been here for 4 days now, and it's been amazing. Been such a good trip. Ryan's been a very good tour guide.
Yeah. So it's exciting to be here. Just a couple of things to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, join Manaaki.io, follow us on social, and today, as we've already seen with Megan, we're going to talk a little bit about founders dilemma, but also we're going to get into a bit of Megan's background. So enjoy, and let's get into it, Megan. So, an engineer, a founder,
yes,
a CEO,
yes,
and now an entrepreneur in residence.
yes.
That's a super interesting background because also, if I track you correctly, actually you were involved in the wool industry as well, right?
Yes.
With Wool Days and Bellish, that was a tech play for crafters, designers, focused initially on knitting.
Yep.
Now the entrepreneur in residence at Startmate.
Yep.
What do you do today? Tell us, what is the entrepreneur in residence at Startmate?
Yeah, so I was hired as entrepreneur in residence, joined Startmate in March this year. Very quickly, my role actually moved to head of accelerator. So I am still technically entrepreneur in residence, who happens to also run the accelerator program at Startmate. So entrepreneur in residence is mostly about bringing my startup founder, CEO experience, I guess, into the Startmate team as we help guide other young and growing companies on their journey, bringing a lot of the hard-learned lessons, experience, what are kind of the realities, how can we actually help founders versus what do we think is helpful. And then, so that was about just connecting with our founders and kind of very early founders and growing founders, and that's just grown into running the accelerator as well.
That's good. That's, you start and then you move into more stuff, but you have the old job as well.
Yep.
Startmate, what is Startmate?
Startmate is, I think our tagline is something along the line of Australia and New Zealand's epicenter for startup ambition. So that probably doesn't mean a lot to most people. So we started in Australia about 10 years ago with an accelerator program, which means that we run a short kind of intense program for people who are just at that early stage of a bit of a trajectory changing moment in their company. We surround them with mentors, investors, resources, people with similar mindsets, so similar founders at similar stages and a few steps ahead, and really trying to accelerate them on their journey. So accelerate that ambition, reaching their goals, and can we kind of help uptick that trajectory changing moment for the company.
Just in Australia or in New Zealand as well?
So that was just in Australia, and I don't know exactly, I probably should have had a look at this beforehand. We kind of expanded our idea into how can we also help New Zealand founders. So we've always been open to New Zealand founders, but we've had a much stronger focus on kind of helping to find and accelerate New Zealand founders as well the last few years. So that's one thing we do. The other, we do a few things at Startmate, but that's kind of our main
and that accelerator lasts how long, and do you invest in the startups? So
it runs for 13 weeks. There's a week 0 that's sort of an onboarding week, but kind of a 12 weeks of acceleration. We currently invest $120K if you haven't been previously priced in your company at a 1.5 million val, so we take about 7.5%. Lasts for 12 weeks. And there's anywhere probably between 12 and 16 other companies that would be going through the accelerator with you, or kind of at any given time. We run it twice a year. It's remote. It wasn't remote before COVID, but since COVID, obviously with COVID we weren't remote, and since COVID we'll actually stay remote because I think we do a much better job at attracting founders from not only kind of Melbourne and Sydney, but all over Australia and all over New Zealand, because we're much more approachable. We do lose a lot, as I'm sure we all know, not being in the same place, but we'll run a little bit of a hybrid model now. So we might do a week 0 together this year to kind of accelerate that founder connection, and so more quickly you can lean on fellow founders as you go through the program.
It's awesome. So before we dive into the founder stuff, let's actually just take you back to some of your history and do some rocket questions.
All right.
Grew up where?
In country Victoria on the coast.
Country Victoria on the coast. What
Yes.
town?
Warrnambool.
Yeah, Warrnambool.
Warrnambool. It was a small town. Apparently it got exploded with COVID, like a lot of country towns did. I think a lot of people moved out of cities.
Nice. Studied what and where?
I studied civil engineering at Deakin Uni via correspondence, which at the time that I studied, correspondence studying wasn't a thing, so I had to apply to do engineering via correspondence, which I had to go through a lot of loopholes to get there because engineering via correspondence was it was not set up to be well supported. But I can go into why I did it, but yeah.
And founded 2 companies.
Yep.
Tell
Wool
us about
Days.
those.
Wool Days was the first company where I sourced local biodynamic wool from farmers in country Victoria, spun it up locally into yarn that could be used for knitting or whatever you might want it. It was really interesting. I spent so much time and effort to create the smallest possible footprint with this yarn, and then I'd say 90% of our customers were overseas. So we shipped it all off overseas anyway. But that was a really interesting journey, and that led me to starting my second company, which was initially called Making Things, changed the name to Bellish a few years in. And that was, as you mentioned before, a bit of a tech play around making craft as approachable as possible. So I'm not sure if you want me to go into that.
Well, how did you, from being involved in something like agricultural and production from the land with wool, like what inspired you to go, let's go into tech with that?
With that. So I was working on that company for a few years. It went really well, even though most of our customers were overseas. They still appreciated kind of the local story and the quality of what we were doing. And that was kind of when I was, I guess, mid-20s. And the more I worked in that space, the more I really struggled to see how I could continue to work in this space that I had such a passion for you know, the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because it felt like it wasn't moving forward. The industry as a whole, I was kind of pulling at threads to try and make it relevant and accessible, not only to people here, but to people overseas. Agriculture is obviously massive, but craft in itself is a huge industry. It's huge, like people expressing themselves through their hands, through making things. It's massive, and it kind of gets re-picked up with every generation. But how we as an industry and kind of the influential players in that industry was thinking about making sure it remained accessible and relevant for the future. You know, 2030, what does craft look like? It wasn't promising. So the few years that I was working on my business, had this really clear idea in my mind of what needed to be done, and I just kept waiting for it to happen. And the more I kept waiting for it, the more I kept looking for it, the more I kind of dug into this idea of what does it mean to be a startup, and this idea of you have an idea, you have this different version of the future, how can you kind of accelerate that journey? And that's what led me to Startmate. I had this idea, I had this really clear vision, didn't have the company because it was a separate company to Wool Days ultimately. And I was like, you know what, if no one else is going to do this, maybe I'll do it one day. And then I was like, I'll apply to Startmate just for the experience, just for the learning. So if one day I want to go down this path, I know what to expect. Applied, got in.
Were you surprised that you got in?
Yeah, I was surprised. I think everyone was surprised. I was a female founder, which even at the time was still one of a few, a craft company in a very tech-focused space. But I think the clarity of my vision, my experience and my passion for it must have shone through.
You know, when you said there your clarity of your vision, did you always have that from day one, or did you have to perfect that over time?
I think it was raw. I think it was there. I think I knew it had built up over kind of probably even before Wool Days, my idea of what it meant to craft, who was building the future, how were people going about that. I think I refined it over time in terms of how to express it as clearly as possible, how to use that vision to drill down into strategy and all of those kind of things. But in my head, I had a very clear vision of what the future could be. The specifics were a little fuzzy, but I was very convinced that this version of the future can and should be a reality, and someone needs to make it happen.
If you go ahead 30, 40 years, do you see yourself on or near the land, living?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when I started Wool Days, me and my partner, we bought a block of land. It didn't have anything on it. We converted this old shed it was in country Victoria where it gets freezing, although saying that to people in New Zealand probably, but it gets really cold, and we converted this shed that was a cute little setup. We ran our business. I ran my business from there. We didn't think about insulation. We didn't think about anything. So I'd be running my business, hugging a hot water bottle, 10 blankets on me, like packing wool, sending it off. So moved to Melbourne. I've moved around a lot, back in Melbourne at the moment, but the goal is find some sort of financial freedom so that I can go out and live on the land again, because that's ultimately where I want to be and what makes me happy.
We've got lots of land in New Zealand.
We do. It is gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning. Yeah.
This is the first time to New Zealand?
No, I was a liftie in Queenstown for a season.
Right.
Yeah. When I was a much younger lady.
When you get down there, the snow has actually just arrived on the Southern Alps. I saw today that I could see some photos down there.
Yeah.
Which we're all excited about, and we're excited about the Aussies coming over, because all of our tourism businesses need the support.
Yeah, it's so exciting that it's opened up again. And surprisingly, it was actually really easy to get here. So just quick tourist tip, it's easy to get here. Come on over.
It is easy, isn't it? Now, founders, and the difference between being a founder and advising founders.
Yeah.
So this is, as I said, this is the first talk around, I've got this desire to unpack those two different perspectives, both what a founder sees and also what people helping founders see as they go on those journeys. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you've been both.
Yeah.
A founder and now helping founders.
Yeah.
When you were a founder, did you help other founders, like through Startmate?
Yeah, so I went through Startmate and almost immediately turned back around to the next cohort, and I was a mentor, because I think that, and we'll probably dig into this, I think that most of the time, the most helpful person that a founder can talk to is someone 1 or 2 steps ahead. So it's not years ahead, it's not someone who's never done it before, it's someone who's 6, 12, 18, 24 months ahead, who's lived it, who's solved similar or the same problems, and that being there's you as yourself move you forward as a founder, move your company forward, but so many different people help you get there. And I think it's, I don't know if responsibility is the right word, but when you move forward, it's part of being a founder that you look back and say, all right, someone help me get here. How do I look back and help the person behind me take the next step forward?
Yeah, but not all people, not all founders are like.
No, they're not.
And of generous spirit. A lot are. And I think the ones that aren't are actually missing out on things, because it helps you cement learnings. I think it helps you be a better founder. Yeah, not mentoring in maybe the most strictest sense, but sharing experiences, having conversations, working through things, having someone to talk to, having that shared empathy. Because I honestly think, and I think this, not everyone agrees, and it's been really interesting running the accelerator with this view that founders talking to founders, I almost think if you're not a founder, this is very controversial, we might need to unpack it, if you're not a founder, any advice that you give founders is kind of secondhand at best. You could be an expert in a field and give advice on X, Y, or Z, but kind of that founder experience, someone trying to talk to the founder experience who hasn't been through it themselves, can be a bit of a minefield with what you think is the reality versus what is the reality of being a founder. I think, like a lot of things, being a founder can only be learnt by being a founder. Yeah, and you can pick up patterns through that, but there is no doubt that the credibility, but also, I suppose, the wisdom to not tell founders what to do. Yeah,
not think you know better. I read a book, they said do this. I think the reality of living it and solving problems and going from 0 to 1, I think 1 to 100, there are a lot of different people who can help you, but that 0 to 1, going from this problem in the broader sense of the term, hasn't been solved to I've solved the problem to a point where there's a market pull and I might be scaling. That 0 to 1 journey is wild. There's a lot to it, and I think fellow founders are the one who understand it the best.
And so I spend a lot of time thinking about the systems that exist for startups and also for small business, right? Mm-hmm. And actually a counter to that is most founders and small business owners are not systematic about the system itself. And so they're often not the best people to talk about how do we grow an ecosystem, but they are totally the best people to talk to each other around how did you overcome this issue.
Yep.
And which is interesting. So let's go back to when you were a founder.
Yep.
And not like last year or 2 years ago, but when you go, and even like when you were on the farm rural, like how did you, like what roadblocks did you experience? And what did you do about those roadblocks?
So many things. I think founders, people who start businesses are inherently can be, and I think more so than not, inherently very optimistic, and you have to be very aware of where your optimism is helping you solve a problem or where it's getting in the way of helping you solve a problem.
So give me some examples of you. Now, I don't want you to talk third person. I want you to talk about your own experience.
Yep.
Or if you've got an example of a roadblock,
yep,
and how you got through it.
So when I decided that Australia needed to be more respectful of where our wool came from and how we processed it and how we shared it with the world from a knitting point of view was kind of my little niche. Trying to talk to farmers was really hard. Trying to find farmers, trying to contact them, trying to buy a couple of bales of wool as opposed to 1,000 tons of wool. It was incredibly hard, and I got so many no's of, unless you're going to buy $500,000 worth of wool, I don't want to talk to you. I can't give you a biodynamic certificate for 2 bales. I can only ship it in large quantities. I can't give you this. I can't do that. So it was about going to the smallest possible farmers that I could find where my, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 order was the right size to get started with them. We scaled over time a little bit, but the system that was set up that I thought could be redefined around how we trace wool, how we, the story of wool, how we share that, how we connect wool to where it gets processed, what that process is, and then ultimately to the end product of whatever that is. When I started, I was like, Australia, wool, it's a given. But it's been so commercialised that level of connection with why farmers are doing it, how they sell their wool, what price they're expecting, what process, was just very, very unapproachable to me as a very small business person.
You know the rejection?
Yep.
Was that about you or was that about them?
I think sometimes it was both. I think sometimes I was not the person that they wanted to work with. I was a 25-year-old female who was pretty bubbly and like, what could you possibly know, and how good is your money really, and why are you trying to change a system? I think I came in too innocent initially. I had this big plan we could make it all better. We could change a system ultimately. How good would it be if everything was traceable and all of this good stuff?
Traceable.
And I had to scale back my own ambition just to get started. So the kind of where I wanted to get started versus the reality of where I got started, which was ultimately buying 2 bales of wool, me being like, here's a map, this is where I bought the wool from, this is where I processed the wool, this is where we packed and shipped it, and then this is where you live, over the other side of the world.
Yeah, it makes no sense, right? But what do they say? Paul Graham said you have to do things that don't scale.
Yeah. So I think when I started that business, I knew nothing about really business, startup philosophy, so I was just, it's just hack work. It was, how many people do I need to call? How many farms do I need to visit? How many times do I need to retell my story? Do I need to tell a different story about what I want? Do I just need to turn up with a check and say, can I please just skim 2 bales off the top of this big truckload that's going somewhere else? So it was a lot of work, and there were so many questions of like, why are you doing this? Why are you trying so hard to make this work? It might not be there.
Do you think that was healthy, that experience that you had, healthy for you going forward when you look back at it now?
I think it was helpful in terms of looking back on when to push and when not to push, and being able to reflect on that. Healthy, I don't know, yes or no. It's hard to say in terms of, like, I got there in the end. I kind of, Wool Days was the vision that I wanted it to be on a small scale. And that was just, persistence. And I think, persistence is something that most founders generally have, of sometimes like knowing when to walk away and knowing when not to walk away. I think I kind of learnt what the barrier was through getting a lot of no's before I kind of figured out how to make it work.
So once you started figuring out how to make it work, did you get more yeses? Or did you still get lots of no's?
I still got lots of no's. I just went to the person that said yes. I was like, all right, well, all of you are a no. This person's a yes, this person's a yes, and this person's a yes. So within this entire ecosystem of the Australian wool industry, which is massive, absolutely massive, there was 1 yes here, 1 yes here, and 1 yes here, but all I needed was to connect those 3 dots. And that helped me do what I wanted. That helped me tell the story that I wanted to tell.
What's negative energy for founders? Well, in your experience, so rejection is probably negative. In hindsight, it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
As long as you find a path forward.
Yeah.
But
I think negative energy can come from others not having a lot of context or taking the time to understand what you're doing and just giving you general advice, and you not knowing what your filter is to take stuff on and not take stuff on. And when you're early, kind of anyone with a little bit of experience seems quite shiny, and you're like, well, they told me to do this thing, it must be the right thing to do. And then you have 20 different points of view to solve a problem that you didn't even know was a problem you should be solving right now, and then your focus is completely scattered, and you're like, I thought I was just trying to solve this problem, and you've highlighted all these other things that I'm apparently not doing right. So I think negative energy can be how you engage with other people around your business, how you engage with customers, knowing who your customer is and how to work with them, and then also being brave enough to say, you know what, you're not my customer, that's not my problem to solve, I'm happy to, you know, you're not my customer.
in your early days and in your startups, could you leave the startup during the day, and when you got home at night, let it go?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
So we might get to this, but so between Wool
You
Days
might
and
not, but
Bellish,
you can bring it up if we don't get to it.
between Wool Days and Bellish, I've been working on this for almost 8 years, and the reason I ultimately shut down Bellish, which was such a high potential company, I still believe was I completely and utterly hit a wall. I just couldn't get out of bed. I stopped caring. I had to walk away from it to, you know, be a healthy person, fix my mental health, process a lot of the learnings, and kind of come out the other side as a whole human. So no, I was absolutely terrible. It was, I guess it was a badge of honor at the start, the first few years, when you had infinite energy to just, I'm thinking about all this time, I'm solving problems, all I want to do is work on it. And then it just got, especially as making things and then Bellish grew, it got all consuming, and I had no practices or no space to kind of, where do I sit in this company, and how do I remove myself from this company and still be a person outside of this company?
I can see in you, in your eyes, the courage that you have for making that sort of decision, because those decisions to shut down, they're not easy.
It's so hard, especially when you're walking away from something that was everything I worked so hard from: customers, traction, a really great product, a lot of upside, a lot of room still to grow, a lot of room to make that dream a reality of genuinely changing the industry and moving them forward and giving an answer to a lot of people. Like, you can tell I'm still so passionate about it. So it was a really, really hard decision to walk away.
Interesting question is, when you think about the energy that you had for Wool Days and Bellish, did you think that you wouldn't have the same energy for whatever else you did? That you had infinite energy for your own stuff, but it's different?
I really did, and that was one of the things that made it so hard to walk away. I didn't know that I'd be able to apply myself as much or get as much satisfaction or meet my, honestly, like, I'm so ambitious, and have that ambition satisfied and met somewhere that wasn't my own thing and completely under my own control.
And guess what? It's not true, right?
It's not true. It's not. It's been such an interesting journey joining Startmate, because I can still be just as ambitious as I want to be, and I'm almost, and this is a bold claim, but I almost feel like maybe all that founder experience was to get me here so I could be a good Sherpa for the next generation of people building the future. Like, people that have baby little messy startups right now, they're building the future we're going to live in 10 years. And I think that there's, like, on the startup spectrum, most will fail and probably should. Some some have no idea what they're doing, some are making up problems, whatever reason. A lot of fail. Some will succeed kind of no matter what. There's so much pull. And then I think there's actually a third group that doesn't get talked about as much, which I do believe Bellish fits in, which is you have what it takes, but there's 1, 2, 3, however many, a few fundamental flaws that you could have avoided had you had the right support, structure, thinking, experience, whatever around you. I think there's some companies that do fail that don't need to fail.
Yep.
So how do we help those ones with a bit of structure and support and
you know,
thinking?
externalization with context and relevance is very important. If you don't have those things, it can be, you know, you can get pulled all over the place.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. So how do you, when you think about working with founders, bottom up or top down?
Can I ask you to ask that question in a different way?
Of course you can. You're my guest. You can do what you want.
Can you please ask that question in a different way?
Yeah.
In terms of bottom up, like...
So what I mean is, you know, micro or macro. So macro means you create an umbrella over it, and then you go, I'm managing these atoms that are startups.
Yeah.
Micro goes, I'm on the ground working with multiple startups and I manage the chaos on the ground.
Yeah. I think...
I mean, I have a view on what the right answer is, but
yeah.
you're my guest.
I'd be super interested to see what you think as well. But I think there's space for both. I think there's a macro environment that can be more conducive to healthy founder-company relationships in terms of like if there's, you know, things we can do to make intros to money easier, intros to talent easier. To find hiring people as your like first, second, up to 10 hires is one of the hardest things you will do as a startup, I think. So I think there's things that we can do to set up a system around making some key milestones / key known massive challenge points easier through, I think we're getting better, but the idea of, and even when I went through Startmate, it was who you know. It was all about, cool, well, you're running a startup, but unless you know this person, you're not going to get invited to this, which means you're not going to meet this person and you're not going to get money.
Do you
agree
agree
with
with
that?
that?
You're not going to be able to hire. No, I don't think it should be who you know at all.
Is Startmate a McDonald's?
A McDonald's in terms of, I don't understand that context.
McDonald's, you know, you get the same chips.
The same.
Every single McDonald's you go to, it's a process.
It's a process.
It's a mechanistic process. But they don't really give a fuck.
No, it shouldn't be. You need to have a general system that is approachable for anyone, no matter your background. But then within that, you need to recognize that every founder and every company is different. And I think so top down, you need to set up a general system for healthy companies and founders.
Yep.
But then the bottom up is you need to recognize that they're all different and there are so many nuances. And I think unless you've been a founder yourself or unless you spent a lot of time listening and understanding founders, it's very hard to try and solve their problems for them or try and be everyone they need or try and be their sounding board or whatever it is. I think that talking to founders is the best thing that you can do from a one-on-one.
So let's talk about that micro interaction. So not running the system, that's Startmate.
Yeah.
How do you approach a founder when they come to you these days and share their dream and their vision?
Yeah, I'm constantly, I'm a very, I don't know if it's come across, I'm quite opinionated, and it comes from my experience and all of those kind of things. So I'm constantly needing to make sure I listen and take on board, but I also think that...
So you're opinionated and you listen.
Yes, but from an opinionated point of view, I think there's some key things, especially with super early founders, that sometimes they need someone to listen and just be a sounding board, but sometimes they just need permission, they need confidence, they need someone to say, you know what, you're doing a good job, maybe here's the next step. Like, it's very, very dangerous to tell someone what to do, and I don't think you should do that. But in terms of generally, like, we're running our applications at the moment, and I opened up my inbox because I think approachability is incredibly important. So I have many emails in my inbox and also my Calendly, so I'm doing a lot of calls. And I would say the majority, almost all the at the core of what I'm trying to do with each, or what each interaction is from a founder's point of view, is a permission or confidence piece. Is this good enough? Am I good enough? Can I apply? Can I do this? And in that instance, it's not for me to sit back and be like, well, it's not, yes, you are good enough. Go for it. Why not? Who's stopping you? And I think that's me being a founder gives me the right to maybe come in a little bit more confident with my answer there, in terms of, it's you're the founder, it's your company, what do you think is the right thing to do? So, and be a bit more pointed in the questions. Do you let them stumble? Sometimes I don't have time, but... Sometimes you don't have time? Well, it depends how many calls I'm trying to get through. So it's about, what's the key thing you need from me right now? Is it a confidence piece? And it's amazing how often, in my experience, it is, of like, am I good enough? Is this piece of traction good enough? Will this look good on the application? Go for it. There's no harm in applying. There's no harm in getting your thoughts down on paper and getting it out there. Is that the engineer coming through? Possibly. That's hard though to balance, right? For you and your day job and the stuff you've got to get through, yes, versus the capacity to stop and listen. Massively. I would give every founder an entire day if I could. But I can't. But I would if I could. So it's always, if you could get one thing out of this interaction, what am I leaving you with? And hopefully it's more confidence to keep going forward, to keep trying. Because do you believe in weekly, monthly, quarterly updates by founders and teams? Or not? Yes and no. So I believe in, as a founder, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to have some system that you're comfortable with that doesn't let you go off on paths or that are completely irrelevant or procrastinate. Like a mirror. Yeah, you need to be able to hold up and say, I'm being really honest with myself that I'm making progress or not. But at the same time, and this is what I'm thinking about at the moment and rethinking about, because we've got 200 alumni companies, like the weekly, monthly, quarterly updates, that's for investors. That's not for you in the way that we expect them. Here's an email, good, bad, uglies. Like, can you explain what is a good, bad, ugly? Because I think, by the way, they can be powerful for any type of business, any types, yes, of founders, any types of small business owners. Yes, but I think the way and I'll talk about them in a sec, but I think the way we frame them, we always need to come back to, how is this helping the founder and the company? Not how is this helping me as an investor, yeah, keep updated on my company. That's secondary down here. Primary, it's how are we holding a mirror up to the company? How is the founder being honest with themselves about what they're working on, what they're progressing on, what's working, what's not working? That's what updates and reflection and measuring, I think, needs to be, not are we keeping all our investors happy? Totally. Quickly, good, bad, uglies is just a really quick way of cutting through a lot of the noise in providing updates. So I think it's a better way of providing updates. Good is what's going good in this week, month, quarter, whatever. Bad is what's going bad, and ugly is like what's really not working, what's company ending stuff. And I think it's a really, like when you say good, bad, ugly, which in kind of my little sphere is very normalized at the moment, what I think the powerful thing about it is it normalizes that in any given week, month, year, you're going to have something good, you're going to have something bad, and you're going to have something ugly. Because even on a startup journey that's like this or like this or like this, there's going to be extreme ups and extreme lows. And I think normalizing that there can be good and bad and ugly things happening at any given time is normal. So you, as a founder, mm-hmm, you know that. You understand the good, the bad, the hard, the terrible, right? Yeah. The challenge for many founders is that at times they feel they can't share that. They'll share it with other founders. Yeah. Like they'll be at the bar or having a tea and going, oh my God, this is just a nightmare. But when it comes to them communicating to investors, they're like, we can't tell them that. Yeah. How do you help them overcome that fear of being more open about what's really going on? I think there's a couple of things. One is normalizing it, and that can be through storytelling, that can be how you open up space for people. Like you have to normalize that, even the Canvas of the world, they've got terrible things and fantastic things happening at the same time. Like building a company is hard, and there's going to be hard things that happen. So one thing that I wanted to bring into this job was being as transparent as possible about the good and the bad and the ugly, and why I had to end my company and what I did wrong and what I learned, because no matter how well someone's going on the outside, there's always good and bad. And just normalizing that. How do we normalize that? And I think there's a few different ways we can do it. And then the other piece is, I think, normalizing it for investors, or whoever, advisors, whoever you're updating. Hopefully you've got good people who understand startups and that they are good and bad and ugly all at the same time. But if you've got an investor that you're afraid to tell stuff, one, red flag on the relationship, but some people find themselves in that position and you can't do anything about it. But where's the education piece for the investors? If they're investing in your company, they should know what they're getting in for in terms of early stage startup. Messy, good and bad at the same time. Big mistakes will be made. Huge progress might be made. I think it's a context and education piece for the people that you're giving updates to as well. And if you have problems, knowing who, one, sharing them is always good, but knowing who that you can lean on to help you solve those problems is a big way to working through them as well. Talking to your investor about, this employee is not working out, I need to let them go. I've never fired someone before, so I'm just ignoring the problem. Have they got other companies in their portfolio they can connect you with? Have they fired someone before? Have they got someone that they can, help you think about framing how you let someone go? You as a founder, it's your company, and it is so important to you, but your problems, as unique as they feel, are generally not completely unique. There's probably been someone else been through a similar situation before, and you can and should, and this is something I did terribly, lean on other people. And there are things that only you can do as a founder, and there are things that you don't have to do by yourself as a founder. And that's where having a good support structure that you genuinely lean on, and then you're not afraid to lean on, I think can help you through a lot.
It's pretty interesting. Now, coming into Startmate.
Yep.
How diverse is historically have the startups been across male, female, race, age?
Okay, I don't have any numbers that I can quote you on.
No. But what's your sense of when you came in?
My sense is we're getting better at all of them at quite a rapid rate. At the start, it was basically all what you'd expect, white dudes, white young dudes. Females, I think, were the first one that made inroads. I was still one of very few females even when I went through, which was 2018. I don't think that's a reflection on Startmate. I think that's a reflection on the larger ecosystem in terms of who's getting to the point where they're ready to go through an accelerator, and what do we need to do in steps way before we kind of open up applications to accelerator-ready companies. And same thing with just general diversity as well. It's something that we track. We track really well now, and we're kind of making sure we do better and better each time. But again, it's sort of we're at a certain point in the ecosystem, and I think there's a lot more we can and could be doing, but it has to come downstream. It has to start kind of as early as possible. How early can we bring access and confidence and education to people who might one day start a company? Not, cool, you might be founder ready, do you want to apply to the accelerator? Diversity is a huge problem, and it generally has to start. It's a generational problem, and it has to start as early as possible to try and solve it. And I think one of the things that
there's no reason why a 16-year-old at school can't start a business, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And I think that's a really exciting thing about businesses now, is that anyone can and should start them if they feel they want to, and that go for it. And I think that, again, it comes back to confidence and access and education. And I think another thing is seeing people, which is I'm a very, I like my privacy, but I know that even though my story isn't a story of success, me being a female founder, other people seeing me as a female founder and trying something, and even though it ultimately didn't work, that could trigger someone else to think, I could do that. And they look like me, or they talk like me, or they're a little bit different. And cool, I could do that. Seeing someone else a few steps ahead of you that has some similar traits to you, I think is a really big thing that we can do as well.
I think it's pretty awesome. Some rocket questions.
All right, stop rambling.
No, you're doing great. Do founders need to make a choice between power and wealth?
I don't think so.
You don't. You can have power and wealth?
I think it's really, really, really unfair to say that you as a founder who, this isn't rocket question answer, you as a founder who has found a problem, solved it and scaled it, need to compromise on one or the other. I'm using power in this sense as in a positive sense.
Of course.
But why say that, we know you can't win, only your investors can win out of this. That's not.
Okay, so let's propose a question. When you've got a founder, hypothetical but not really, that has a control thesis, which is driven through a number of factors, which might also include imposter syndrome, might include insecurity, or lack of knowledge about a certain thing. And so often I see a lot of founders who are domain experts in their industry, but are not tech.
Yep.
And are bringing a tech application to their industry, and they think they can outsource it, right? And they'll outsource. How do you help them? Because you know what my solution to that is, go and apply to Startmate.
Yep.
Because I believe that they will see others and they'll learn from that.
Yep.
The first challenge for me is how I get those teams into Startmate when I know that they have that inherent weakness.
Yep.
And they've got to learn how to pitch on that and how to succeed. But I suppose my question is, how do you help a founder who may not be open to taking the path finding a co-founder when they're worried about being shown up?
Yep. I think, so just for context, I am a non-technical female co-founder that got into Startmate, so there's no limitations, but I think it's that, like, if you genuinely, so there's people who want to be a founder, or people who think they want to be a founder or say they want to be a founder, and then there's the people who have that fire in their belly, they want to solve this problem, it's their problem to solve, they're going to work on it. There's a level of honesty with yourself that you have to have as a founder of what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and am I really here to actually move past any roadblocks I have, i.e. being a non-technical founder. Going on a website that's super sleek and saying, cool, I can outsource, someone can build me an app in 2 weeks for $20,000 and all my problems will be solved. That's not how you build a company. That's not how you build a generational company. That's probably not even how you get your app built in the first place. I don't think. If it's anything more than, here's an app we built in the background, here's your logo on the front. No offense to all the app building companies out there. You have to be really honest about what you bring as a founder and what your weaknesses are and how you're going to approach how to solve them. Are you going to upskill yourself? Are you going to put in the hard yards to find a technical co-founder? Is there a way, and there is significantly more and more ways, that how do I get a V1 out there, low code, no code, website prototype? Like, does the technical solution have to start day one? How else can I get traction? How else can I prove this? How else can I talk to customers? Like, there's so many things you actually can and should be doing before you go out there and build anyway.
I think that, when I think about what you've said, the really fundamental piece is the honesty that the founder and the founders need to have about their context and where they are and what they need to go forward. And that's a challenge for them. It's also a challenge, I think, for people who support founders. Because you've got to actually have time to do that. It's super interesting. Now, any regrets as a founder?
Massively.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Like,
is that heavy for you, or is that light?
It was, and I put a lot of time into processing it to turn it into, from a, I don't know if regret's the right word, but from a very strong awareness of a missed opportunity into a point where I can now draw on those lessons and make sure us as system builders take on those lessons, and me interacting with founders on an individual level, me running an accelerator, can make sure they've gone from a missed opportunity into a massive strength in knowledge, I guess, that I have and can bring to the table. But yeah, like I'm sitting here thinking about all the ways that my company could have and should have been successful, knowing what I know now with a bit of distance behind it, and sitting here being like, there's another version of me that's...
Do you think you'll start another company?
I really, really did think I would. I thought that I am a founder at heart. I'm always going to be a founder at heart, I think. But this Startmate experience has been really interesting in kind of how else that ambition and drive and independence can play out, and how else I can impact the system. As I said before, part of me feels like the crazy, massive roller coaster of the founding experience got me to a point where I can... What if that was to get me to a point here where I'm, arrogance aside, maybe one of the right people to help shape early stage ecosystems and really shape who and how we're building the future. Because I don't think we have enough deep thinkers on a practical system-wide level to ask the right questions and build the right systems around like who is building the future.
Did that surprise you?
Yeah.
The person that hired you, do you think they knew already?
Potentially.
Or did you hire yourself? Did you turn up and say to Michael and others, hey, I'm going to be your entrepreneur in residence?
Yeah, basically. Yes. That's more how it happened. I think he knew that I had a lot of experience to share, but kind of my ambition, switching lens from my version of my company and that future to, well, who is building the future, has been really interesting, and I think in a sense for myself far more ambitious, of like, we need the right people helping the right people to build the future.
Now, confidently, I always figure that working one-to-one with a business, owner, founder, I think I can deliver value, right? I've always been driven about how to do that at scale. That's not to say I don't value the one-to-one, I do, and I love, I spend, 2-3 days a week with founders, right, and small business owners. But I'm interested around your thoughts around, which is a bit geeky, how do you think you're going to work with mentors who are working with companies, and you're behind the system enabling that?
Yeah. So this is something, when I joined Startmate, I was sat on my hands for the first month or so listening, because I was like, gosh, I've got some really strong opinions here, and I really want to stay, but I just need to listen. So I went through Startmate, and then I was a mentor, so I'm still quite connected to the journey. So I had a lot of context, but I was very strict on myself that I sat on my hands and I listened. But then I was like, all right, I think this is what we can and should do. In reality, for how many resources we have, this is what we should be doing, and then the actual reality of time and resources, and I'm kind of one person, this is what we need to do right now. So how I think about mentors at the moment is, first and foremost, like from a founder point of view, what do they need? Who do they need? They need people who have empathy for them, people who can be genuinely helpful and want to be genuinely helpful, people who have time. So there's this category of like, who are the most high, like if I was talking to a founder and I was like, if I had all the time and space in the world, who and what could I do to help you? And I think it's about finding a few key people, 3 to 5 key people that can turn up and add value as required.
So not an hour a week, a bit more.
No, not necessarily. Sometimes it is like, maybe for some kind of person or some kind of relationship it is. I don't want to put limits on it, which is something that we're thinking about. But so there's this core group of people, and then there's actually, I think there's an extra, an outer layer of experts. So people who are, this terrible example, really good at setting up Facebook ads so that you could run test yourself. So a layer of experts. So we've got a pool of about 120 mentors at the moment who are also all investors in the companies. We've got a wait list of about 350 people, and I would say, unashamedly, these are the best founders and business people in Australia. Like we do a fantastic job. Sorry, and New Zealand, that was terrible. Australia and New Zealand, we do a fantastic job at attracting some really, really high caliber people. And it's my job to say, 16 founders, 400 investor mentors is a terrible ratio. You're going to completely overwhelm the founders and give them whiplash, and they'll spend 12 weeks being overwhelmed with all this different advice. So what I've done is actually, we wrote up a bit of a questionnaire with all these investor mentors we work with. Through the questionnaire, how many people actually fit the criteria of who can be a partner mentor? So who can go in the trenches, who's got the experience, who can be an expert mentor? So called upon as required, all of those kind of things. Who's an investor mentor? It's got the cash, got the connections, got the experience, wants some deal flow, can be genuinely helpful, but again, called upon as required. And then how do we set up the founders so that they know these are your really high touch, really high impact people. These are the people that know who you are and you know who they are, but can be called upon for expert
It's
advice.
almost like organised chaos.
It is. It's organising chaos.
But that's the engineer coming through, is it?
I think so. And also just like we have no time. How do I best organise this so that we can do better and better and better each time?
Now, as we get to near the end, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, in your ideal, when we think about, and this is to a New Zealand audience generally, what sort of, and applications close this week, right, for the next cohort?
Weekend, yeah.
When people are thinking about Startmate, what's your aspiration for founders out of New Zealand or Australia? What sort of things are you looking for from a founder to apply, whether it's this week or end of the year or whatever? Because
so just for context, we'll take, no one's too early, and we genuinely mean that. I got in with just an idea, and we do take companies with just an idea, and we probably can add the most value up into about a Series A, I would say, in this accelerator context. What I'm looking for, what we're looking for, where and how I think we can add the most value is who has that fire in their belly to solve the problem that they're working on. Who is here to, not for the glory of it, not because they think founders being cool, not for any other reason than there is a fire in my belly and this is how I'm getting it out. I'm building a company to solve this problem, whatever problem in the broader sense, whatever that problem is. And are you ready to go through a intense 3-month period of genuinely having access to kind of the best of the best to help accelerate and help potentially put you in an inflection point on your business, whether that's getting an MVP out there and testing it with customers, whether that's starting to scale. It doesn't matter, as long as you're between idea that you're ready to run with and kind of Series A. I think we can be very helpful.
So compelling vision, identified a problem.
Yep, compelling vision, big
sole
ambition.
Founder? Can you be sole founder?
You can be a sole founder, yep. It's like some people are sole founders and that's fine. Some people need co-founders and if you're looking for a co-founder, you're probably not going to find one in the accelerator. If you're looking for a co-founder and you're kind of still at that really early stage, I'd say go do that first, because you don't want to be looking for a co-founder whilst in the accelerator. It's a very focused period and I guess you want to be going through it with your founding team. But it's the fire in the belly. So whenever I talk to people about their application, it's the passion and ambition. Like, what in 10 years' time, all going well, how are you redefining your corner of the universe? What are you doing here? And what's the passion you have for it? How is that fire in your belly shining through? And then, are you an executor? So what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow to make units of progress towards that ultimate big ambition? I think the point between here and up here is significantly less relevant. So many ways that could go right or wrong.
Yep.
So it's, are you an executor and do you have a big vision and are you passionate about it?
It's not how pretty your IM looks or your pitch deck or anything. You've got to be able to...
We don't even see those things. We don't look at we don't ask for your, what's it even called? The thing?
I don't even know, drop sheet, IM, pitch deck.
It's you, so it's a written application, we ask for some answers, and then a video application, which we put no value on production quality. It's just you talking to Loom, talking to your phone, whatever it is. It's an opportunity for that passion and ambition to shine through. And also accessibility. Some people aren't so good at writing, but are happy to talk to a camera and vice versa.
Last question, which I ask every single guest. Take yourself back to the 15-year-old version of you now. What advice, would you give yourself as you look into this world in 2022?
I would say don't let the world talk you out of your confidence. Like I am a pretty confident person and I was, but I think you go through phases of like, oh, it's not the right thing to be confident. It's not the right thing to back yourself. Like, it's okay to back yourself. It's okay to want something more and different and work hard and go for it. And I did that for the most part, but there's definitely periods where you think falling in line might just be the right thing to do.
Awesome. Have a great tour of New Zealand. You're going. Where are you going from here? Ryan, where are you going from here?
Christchurch and then back to Auckland.
Christchurch,
no,
Auckland.
Wait, we are in Auckland.
And then send a whole lot of founders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Megan, thank you very much for taking the time to share a little bit about you. And I think it is actually a rare situation where you can both be a founder and then help founders. I reckon it really makes a difference. I think personally, seeing more leaders in the ecosystem who are founders, who are also female, and more diversity in that, I think is really important. And I love the way that you are approaching solving the problems of helping others, which is pretty awesome. And from a Manaaki perspective, we're pretty excited about the partnership that we have with Startmate and how we can together contribute to the startup and small business ecosystem. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And that's our first wrap for Real Talks this year, and we're going to be interviewing a lot of people. I might even be taking the camera and Luke to Australia, but he doesn't know about that yet. I just came up with that idea. Now, I've got a few of the Aussie mates that we've said that we would interview. I'm trying to encourage them to come over here. So I think the next one's going to be in about a week or two, and thank you very much for screening in. Good luck to Megan.
Thank you.
Have a good trip. See you, Ryan. See you, everyone. Thanks very much. We're out.